Well, I'm usually somebody who really likes to put out the positive things and point out the good things about, these Batman Arkham games. Today, we are being negative, and if anybody is good at being negative and just tearing something down, it is me. I am the best at tearing apart somebody and just tearing into them, and that's what we're doing today. Today we are going to be looking at one thing that each Batman Arkham game did worst. That's right, we are going to point out all your weaknesses, or your biggest weakness, I should say, and we are going to tear you to shreds. But it's only fair because I did point out one thing that each Batman Arkham game did best, so I think it's fair to flip the coin over and see what's on the other side. So, without wasting too much of your time, we're going to get right into this. And if you guys enjoy, make sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to more content. And this is one thing each Arkham game did worst. Batman Arkham Asylum. It's a lot of people's nostalgia game. It is some people's even favorite game in the entire series. However, that doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't have any flaws to it. Now, I'm going to say something here, and it's not really controversial. The worst part about this game is the combat and the stealth. But that could also be seen as a positive thing. But today we are being negative. I get to be negative. I'm going to tear into this combat as much as possible, right? Because even though Batman Arkham Asylum, it started the free flow combat system, so we're going to give Rocksteady their round of applause for that. And we do have to appraise them for that. It doesn't mean it was executed perfectly in the beginning, though. Right? The combat could sometimes be slow and stiff, and even sometimes I found it to be kind of choppy. Almost as if you were in close range with somebody, but for some reason you just weren't able to hit the character. You weren't able to hit the enemy for whatever reason. Sometimes it kind of lacked that fluidness. I think that's a really good way to use it. And the other issue I had with it, and again, this is the first time that they were doing this, so it's kind of an appraisal on future titles, and I'll talk about that more. But the fact that as the game progressed, there was slight enemy increases in difficulty, but not enough for you to really say, wow, that was really challenging. Because there was only 2 new enemy types added throughout the course of the game, right? It was the enemies that you had to cape stun and then punch, and the people with the electric fry stick thing. I forget what they're called. But yeah, they had those sticks that you had to jump over them to hit them. Other than that, there wasn't really much added difficulty to the combat whatsoever. And if you want to talk about the stealth was good, right? It was basic. And that's not a bad thing. Basic can be very good. However, the issue is that it just lacked variety. It was kind of the same thing of you walk into a room, you silent take down everybody, and you leave. And you could say that that's the general aim anyway. But at least in future titles, you're able to backclaw someone over the edge, under the ground, knocking them unconscious. Or you can use inverted takedowns, but that's an upgrade requirement, Batman Arkham Asylum. You can use smoke pellets to take out enemies quickly, disruptors, freeze grenades. There's multiple different ways to take out enemies that don't just require silent takedowns. And you could say that's technically the same thing in Arkham Asylum. I guess you can backclaw enemies over the railings as well with the triple backclaw. That was actually really nice. But it just lacked basic gadget variety. And actually, it didn't really add very much difficulty. The only thing that really got added was the heartbeat monitor, so that the enemies would know when you get knocked out. As well as at one point, they added those mines on top of the gargoyles, so that you couldn't really go on them. But then they never added that again in future titles. So that's actually an appraisal on Batman Arkham Asylum. But if you were to ask me, I just think that it just lacked basic variety. And I think that's the biggest issue with it. But like I said before, that is not a knock on, Batman Arkham Asylum necessarily. That's more of an appraisal on future titles. That's me more praising how good Rocksteady and WB did to improve the combat and the stealth going forward following this game. And I want to give them their appraisal, and I want to make sure you guys understand I'm not just crapping on the developers just for the sake of it. Yes, could it have been better? Sure. But for a first time, it was very well done. However, I have to say, it was definitely the worst in the series, and I think that's kind of a fact. Moving on to Batman Arkham City. What did this game do worst? Well, to be honest with you, it took me a little bit of time to think about this one, because this game, in my opinion, has some of the most well-roundedness, if not the best well-roundedness, out of the entire franchise. It's between that one and Origins for me, but something that I kind of had to think about it, and I think that this thing did this thing worse than any other, besides with the exception of maybe Batman Arkham Knight. And that's kind of where it gets a little bit subjective. But for me, Arkham City had the worst main antagonist, right? Because for those of you who don't really remember, Hugo Strange was the main antagonist in Batman Arkham City, right? And I'm going to get into this a little bit, right? Because Hugo Strange was kind of meant to be a change in pace, right? Because we had kind of gone through the Batman and Joker thing. So, okay, we've done that. So let's move on to something a little bit different, right? Someone who's not really a physical threat, but he's more of a mental threat due to knowing Batman's identity. However, Strange doesn't do anything, despite the fact he literally said, "And if you try to stop me, I guarantee everyone will know your secret." And then Batman literally proceeds to try to stop him, and Strange just doesn't do anything about it. He's literally just a wimp that you can pretty much pick on at free will, it seems like. And not only that, but he didn't do anything throughout the course of the entire game. He didn't even try to remind Batman, I know your identity. You should stop doing that because I know who you are. There was none of that. Instead, he just constantly reminded us how many more hours until Protocol 10. And to add insult to injury, the Joker literally took over because the developers knew that Strange couldn't do anything yet because it was too early in the game, right? We had to have a story that lasted for more than an hour, otherwise this whole thing would have been kind of, pointless to begin with. Which makes the Joker's bloodline thing, to me at least, just feel like a massive filler. Like, it only takes up the time necessary until Hugo Strange is ready to start Protocol 10. And then as soon as we're done with the Joker, or not done with the Joker, but as soon as the Joker kind of is pushed to the side for the time being, then Protocol 10's ready to start, and then we go finish off with the Joker afterwards. So we couldn't even end the game with Hugo Strange being the main antagonist, just because the Joker had to come in and take over everything due to A, the Batman and Joker, but B, kind of it just being a massive filler in the plot, so that the game didn't end in the first hour. Because we could have ended this like that, right? We could have ended this pretty freaking quickly, but for the sake of the game, we had to keep going. So, you could argue that Batman Arkham Knight had the worst antagonist, but, and I'm going to get into that in a bit later, though. I don't want to talk about that just yet, so I'm going to sit here and claim that Batman Arkham City had the worst main antagonist, in my opinion. And now we're moving on to the game that now a lot of people are finally starting to jump on the bandwagon and realize this game is really, really amazing all along. However, that doesn't mean it actually doesn't have any flaws, right? Because when you're picking out the worst thing about Batman Arkham Origins, again, similar issue I had with City, it was a little bit tricky for me to think of something that this game genuinely did that was the worst out of all of them. But just because it's the worst doesn't necessarily mean it was bad. And that's kind of what you can argue I'm dealing with here. But again, this is just my opinion. But the thing that Origins did the worst, in my opinion, was the traversal or the map size. It could have been either one of those as the issue, right? And my issue with this map and the traversal is that if you're going to use a massive map for a game, you should be able to make it so that you can get across it in a decent amount of time. And Origins does not have that, right? The gliding in this game feels really, really slow, but it's the only way for you to really get around unless you want to use fast travel, which at the start of the game, you don't even have, half of them or 3/4 of the fast travel spots available to you because you have to go unlock them, and some of them you can't unlock until later in the game. So it's a bit tricky and it's a bit of a hassle. So if you don't want to use the fast travel and you want to do it properly and glide around the Gotham properly, then you're going to be gliding around for several minutes, right? Especially at the Gotham Bridge, right? Every friggin' time you go to cross that bridge, it takes it feels like 3 minutes. It might not actually be 3 minutes, but it feels like it, and it takes a very, very long time. Now, I do want to cut this a little bit of slack because maybe the gliding in this game is supposed to be a bit slower. It felt it to me. That could potentially be due to Batman's suit size, right? It's a lot more bulky in this game than in future titles, if you guys remember. So that could have been a thing the developers did on purpose, and if so, fair enough, I respect it. But I think if you're playing a Batman game, chances are you're not going to be wanting to use the fast travel. And I think the fact that they had to add it to the game goes to show that the map itself was just too big. And the thing is, a lot of the stuff for this game, it doesn't even end up really getting used. A lot of it doesn't have a purpose. Like in Batman Arkham City, a lot of stuff had a purpose. Specifically, a lot of Riddler trophies, or there were side missions. Usually, most buildings had some form of purpose. But in Batman Arkham Origins, a lot of these don't. And it kind of just feels like a waste and like a lot of unnecessary space. And I'm not saying that the map on its own being big is an issue and having useless space is an issue if the traversal itself would be quicker and more efficient. And by that I mean just don't make the bridge as friggin' long. Make it like 30 seconds to get across at most. Then I don't have to friggin' spend the entire time using fast travel as a way to get around and make it kind of take away any sort of momentum that I had built in this game. So in my opinion, the traversal is absolutely the worst in Arkham Origins because of the fact in Arkham City, the map is small enough to where I can get around it in like a minute or two. And Arkham Asylum's map's not big enough for traversal to even really be too much of an issue. And Arkham Knight also has the Batmobile and much better grapnel boosting. So I would definitely say the traversal is the worst in Batman Arkham Origins. Oh boy, we are starting to get into very interesting territory with Batman Arkham Knight, right? I mean, this game, you could tell that Rocksteady very, very much took so much time developing the graphics and the gameplay, the combat and the stealth, right? Like, we compliment these things all day. They put a lot of time and effort into the Batmobile, but this game does suffer from a major flaw that I don't think the other games suffered from nearly as badly until I played through it again. And I finally realized just how bad this part is. I shouldn't say how bad it is, but I should say how, like, mid it is, right? If you were to take this on its own, I would say it is extremely mid. And that is the story. The overall campaign is kind of just mid, in my opinion. Like, if you really want to break it down, it is simply the worst story for a multitude of different reasons, right? I mean, first of all, like I said, the story is just boring. I don't find it super engaging or even feel like Batman cares to be there, right? A lot of times when Batman's talking, it doesn't feel like he has a sense of urgency in his voice. Maybe that's because he's a veteran, he's calm, cool, and collected, and doesn't get angered by the littlest of things. But I also think he just doesn't care that much. I think his mental health is declining at this time due to the Joker blood situation. And I also think that, you know, the toll of being Batman would take a lot out of you. But he just sounds so done. And the main villain is meant to be Scarecrow in this game, which, honestly, he was a better main antagonist than Hugo Strange. And I said I was going to get into this a little bit. Even though Scarecrow is not really a threat in the least to Batman, not physically, he is a mental one similar to Hugo Strange and utilizes fear and actually can do so very, very well. We've seen that done in Batman Arkham Asylum. And so at least he isn't the worst one, but his personality just isn't interesting. He's kind of just a bland villain who wants you to have fear and show you that you're human. But, like, yeah, we know that fear exists, bro. We understand that. Like, I don't get the entire point. But on top of that, he gets taken over by the Arkham Knight. Like, he gets overshadowed by the Arkham Knight, I should say. And the Arkham Knight himself also isn't super interesting. Like, due to the marketing of this game, everybody pretty much knew going into this that the Arkham Knight was going to be Jason Todd. Everybody knew that going into this. Simply just because of the fact that it was literally revealed in marketing, right? I didn't pay attention too much to the marketing at the time. I was only a kid, so I didn't really notice that kind of stuff too much. But a lot of other people did. And Jason Todd himself was not an interesting character, like, or the Arkham Knight, I should say, was not that interesting. He was kind of a cliche villain who only doesn't kill Batman because of the plot. And we don't get to really do much against him throughout the course of the entire game. But if this had been marketed differently, the Arkham Knight could have been a more interesting character. But, like, when it comes to this game in general, I wouldn't really sit there and say that there was a whole lot of memorable moments. A lot of it was puzzle solving, which I'm not saying puzzle solving is a bad thing, but that's, like, what felt like made up, like, 90% of this game was just pure puzzle solving. But instead of feeling like I'm Batman, like, yeah, I understand puzzle solving is to be expected to a degree, but it felt like at every single turn, it felt like it never kind of tapered off from the Batmobile to whatever else there was that there was issues with in this game. the overall campaign just felt boring. It kind of just was not very memorable. There isn't a lot of stuff that you can really look back on, maybe outside of the ending with Bruce Wayne's identity getting revealed. But there's outside of that, there's not really a lot that you can look back on and go, wow, that was actually really interesting. I really enjoyed that. Last but not least, I do not want you guys to forget about this one, because this one is a crucial one, and that's Batman Arkham Shadow. Now, Batman Arkham Shadow was a very, very good game. Let's not get that mistaken. I thought it was a fantastic game. The best VR game I've ever played. Probably one of the best VR games ever. Even though I haven't played it, I played other ones, I should say. But I still believe, I guarantee you, that most people would probably agree that this is one of the better ones. And this game was so much fun, and I want to just give it its round of applause once again, because it absolutely deserves it. But we are being negative today, like I said. And I get to be negative with Batman Arkham Shadow even. Now, originally I was going to put in the filler, but then I kind of thought about it, and I thought, well, every Batman game tends to have its filler, so I'm not going to be too harsh on it, and I didn't want to do a cop-out of something like there's no side missions. So I wanted to kind of switch it up a little bit, and I think the thing that Batman Arkham Shadow did the worst was the climax, the big almighty reveal. Now, you could say that belongs to Batman Arkham Knight because it's Jason Todd, but that was because of marketing. If there wasn't a marketing issue, the reveal of it being Jason Todd could have been much better. But the actual reveal of, the Rat King being Two-Face was kind of an underwhelming reveal to me, personally. Usually within a game, with having a big plot twist, it ends up being somewhat interesting. But then we reach the climax and find out Harvey was the Rat King. And part of me was kind of left confused, and part of me kind of felt unsatisfied. Partially, it's just because of the fact we know that Harvey ends up becoming a bad guy regardless. So I don't think that adding on top of that, making him the Rat King, is really going to do much to begin with. And on top of that, I have an idea of who should have been the Rat King. I think it should have been someone like Anarchy, for a couple of different reasons, right? A character that we know for a fact would stand for the same morals and values as someone like the Rat King and the Rat team in general. I don't know what they're called. The Rats. We'll call them the Rats. The Rats in general stood for a very similar concept of getting rid of corruption by any means necessary, right? Even if that means killing people, even if that means some really extreme means, but they just want to remove evil off the streets. They're not looking to kill the good guys. And I think that's something that Anarchy absolutely stood for. But the other reason why I think it could have been Anarchy as well is because we still don't know what happened to him after Batman Arkham Origins. We haven't seen him. So this could have been a good way to have him put away for absolute life. There could have been something that we knew of what happened to Anarchy. But with it being Two-Face, it just doesn't really seem to fit his character. Because that would have meant that he was already turning evil before the actual, Two-Face incident happened in the courtroom. And yeah, that means he's always had mental issues to a degree, and I guess you could say that's what it's highlighting here. But I just personally don't think that it being Two-Face really made much sense, or even really helped out any of the lore that's surrounding this franchise in any way, shape, or form. So to me, the climax in Arkham Shadow was probably the most disappointing. And well, guys, this is one thing that each Batman Arkham game did worst. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments below, because to be honest, I'm sure there's a few different things I could have picked for these games, but these are the things, to me at least, that stood out the most as the worst in the Batman Arkham franchise. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Let me know what else you guys want to see next. I know I keep talking about it, and I do plan on playing other games and stuff on stream. So, if you guys want to see that, let me know down in the comments below. And for those of you who are still here, you make sure to subscribe, because we're trying to get to 1,000 subs by the end of the year. And if we do that, I will play all 4 Batman Arkham games in one day. I know it's technically 5 now, but if you expect me to play Batman Arkham Shadow as well as the other 4 in one day, you're crazy, and I don't even think that's possible. So, thank you guys so much for everything. Thank you so much for all the support. I appreciate you all very greatly. Thank you so much for stopping in. Make sure to subscribe for more content, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace!